Hey everybody, welcome to Homesteading Off the Grid. Today we are going to officially become vermiculturalisters. That means we're going to start a worm farm. We're going to take you through the step-by-step process on how you can start a worm farm too. So the first thing we've got to do is have appropriate worm bins in which to keep our worms. Now, as you know, vermiculture is the science of using worms to create worm castings, which is a fancy word for worm poop, to use as fertilizer in our gardens, with our vegetables, with our flowers. It's said that anything we grow in pure worm castings will grow 3 times as robustly as anything we grow in just typical potting soil or garden soil. We're going to put it to the test and find out. This works. This process should give us enough castings in about 3 months to start using in our soil. So we start with bins. These particular bins happen to be the same size. You want to make sure that when you sink one bin into the other that you do get clearance, okay? Because we're going to be drilling holes in the bottom of the top bin so that if excess moisture builds up inside the bin, it can drip down into the secondary bin, and then of course we can take the top bin out and dump the liquid from the secondary bin. Now, with these bins, what I found was that when I put them together, the bottoms of the bins touched. There was not enough space to allow the moisture to leak out and seep through once I've drilled my holes. So let me show you what I've done. If you look in my bin, you see that I simply have 2 cinder blocks in there to suspend the top bin from the bottom. Some bins are created to where there will naturally be a space and you don't need to use blocks. But if that space isn't there, put some bricks or some blocks or some stones in here so that your top bin can set above those and the liquid can drip down. Now, don't use wood. I almost did that, but I caught myself. Remember, wood will absorb moisture, and that can lead to molding or rotting, and it could damage the health or decrease the livelihood of your worms. Now, here's what else we're going to need. Obviously, we're going to need soil or dirt. Our soil came straight from our garden, and it came from one location where we actually mix grass clippings in with the soil, so this is sort of a maybe 60% soil, 40% grass clipping mulch. We're also going to use grass clippings. We're going to use some toilet paper and paper towel rolls. And over here we have cardboard that's been soaking in water for some time because we're going to use moist cardboard. I want to point out what I did here, and I'd recommend this to you as well. Before putting my cardboard in the water to soak, I took off any labels. This was to make sure we're not getting any inks, dyes, or glues in our soil for our worms. Now, if you look over here, we have various types of items we're going to use for our worms' food, and we'll explain this more later when we get to that point. But I want to point out now the simple tools we'll need to make our bins. We're going to use a drill to drill the holes in the bottom for the excess moisture to leak out, as well as air holes around the side, because we will be leaving the top on so that our worms don't come out. Now, remember, the definition of genius is the art of picking brains. There's always more than one way to do everything. We're going to keep our lid on ours, therefore we'll be drilling air holes around the sides. However, some people don't put the tops on their bin, and they'll use a night light above their bin, and the worms are sensitive to light, so that keeps them down in the soil, keeps them from coming out of the bin. Always more than one way to do things. We're just showing you how we're doing it. So we need the drill. We're also going to need screen, because when we drill our air holes on the side, we're going to want to cover them with screen. You can buy screen at the hardware store, or just I used old screen from the attic that we're not using. I cut it out. I'll be gluing that over the air holes so the worms don't climb up and crawl out the air holes. Now, with that being said, we're also going to need to use our hot glue gun to glue the screen over the air holes. And that's all there is to it as far as what we need. And again, when we get to the point, I'll explain the food. But for now, let's get started drilling our holes. Hey guys, we're back, and I have my wonderful assistant Daniel, my 7-year-old son, with me. He's going to help me out with the worms from this point. Okay, a couple things I want to point out about the drilling. Make sure that after you've drilled your holes, you've gone through and you made sure that there are no plastic shavings inside your bin. That could cut and injure your worms. Also, I noticed, you probably see from the video there, we figured out that these grooves were actually at a lower level than the center parts I originally drilled, so we went back to make sure to get them so water wouldn't just pile up here. So now from here we're going to go ahead and create our bed for our worms. Now a lot of these videos you'll see from other people, they'll show using shredded newspaper. It's wonderful to use shredded newspaper. You know why we're not doing it? Because we don't have any. So we're using what we have available, and it all works too. Here's what we're going to use. We're going to start with a layer of grass clippings. So buddy, you want to grab the grass clippings and just throw them in here? I don't think, well yeah, you can put it all in there. If it's too much, we'll just take it out. Now you want to spread it out and spread it around. Now we're using this on the bottom because this will help retain moisture on the bottom. Not excessive moisture. We don't want excessive moisture, but this should help maintain enough of a moisture level down here so the worms are comfortable. Now we're going to put a layer of our cardboard that we had soaked in the water, and my little helper Daniel is the one who actually ripped this cardboard up and put it in the water, huh? Okay. So we're just going to take it out of the water and we're just going to layer it on top of the grass. Now guys, I will point out to you about the water and the cardboard. Be conscious of the temperature. I just made it lukewarm, which is approximately room temperature as you know, so that you're not going to shock your worms. You're not going to be giving them water that's too cold or water that's too hot. You just lay it in there, buddy. It doesn't have to be exact. We're not laying bricks. We're just putting some wet cardboard in here for worms, huh? So while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and add a few toilet paper rolls. Worms love toilet paper rolls. It's cardboard, just like the wet cardboard there. I have a theory though as to why worms love toilet paper rolls. Here's a question, buddy. Let's see if you get this one right. Who do people like?
People?
Yeah, who do people like?
People.
People like people? What kind of people? Any particular people?
Just normal.
Just normal people?
Any kind.
Alright, you can go ahead and keep adding the cardboard in there, buddy. That was a question one of my managers years ago when I used to sell investments asked me, and I was like, I don't know, celebrities, I don't know, political leaders. But the answer was people like themselves. And the point of that is that when you're selling investments or anything else to people, don't talk about yourself or even the investment or what you're selling. Talk about them. I don't know. But the point of that story is, my theory is that worms like toilet paper rolls because worms like themselves, just like people. And toilet paper rolls are cylindrical, roundish and brown, just like worms. I might be way off in my theory, but that's my theory. Alright, so you got all that in there, buddy?
Yep.
Alright, so I'll do this next part because what we're going to put in there next is heavy, so you just step back there out of the way, buddy.
Okay.
And then from here, I'm going to simply take my soil and I'm going to add a layer of soil. Now with the grass clippings and the moistened cardboard and the toilet paper and paper towel tubes, we shouldn't have to worry about this soil going down through the holes we drilled. Those holes weren't very big anyway, just big enough for moisture. Now I don't want to use too much soil because basically the whole point of vermiculture is using the worms to make soil out of the cardboard, the grass clippings, and then the food matter we're going to be putting in here next on top of this. So that should, look at that, here's a wild worm. I'm actually going to return this one to the wild. I'm going to lay this one off to the side, and here's why. I bought my worms, guys. I bought them on Amazon from a place called Uncle Jim's Worm Farms. I got 1,000 red wigglers for $30.95, roughly 40 bucks after shipping. They came promptly. They were all alive. So I'd recommend Jim's Worm Farms. Don't know the guy, never talked to him, probably never will. I'm not plugging him for any reason other than the fact that he sold me a quality product at a fair price that actually came as advertised. I believe wild animals belong in the wild. That's why I bought domesticated red wigglers instead of just going out and getting 1,000 red worms from the wild. He came from the wild. He will return to the wild. Okay? So, I'll put it, don't step on him, buddy. All right, so if I find any other worms in here, I'll make sure to return them to the wild too. But this should be very sufficient for now. So, from this point, we are going to start adding our food products. So, buddy, you want to walk around back there and come over here and hand me these things as I ask you for them? Nope, not that one yet. That's going to be last, and you'll see why. I'll go ahead and get this one because this is kind of heavy. So, guys, here are just several things you can put in your bin that your worms will turn into castings or compost. Paper towels or toilet paper, as long as you didn't use them to clean. Like if you were using these to clean windows with Windex or bleach, don't put them in there. We just use these to wipe our hands with this morning at breakfast. Stale bread. Worms love stale bread. So we'll put some of that in here. Here's an old stale biscuit, I think, from yesterday morning's breakfast. And here's actually a pizza crust, which, as you know, is bread. My son doesn't eat pancake syrup on his pancakes, so here was some of his leftover pancakes. Now, if these had syrup on them, I probably wouldn't put them in here because of the sugar content. And then, of course, coffee grounds. We have a huge serving dish full of coffee grounds here because we put all of our coffee grounds in our gardens to help add nitrogen to the soil. Now, I have been researching vermiculture here for some time, and I've gotten mixed messages on this coffee ground stuff. Everybody agrees that they're good for the worms, but some people caution using too much because it raises the acidity level in the soil. So just to err on the side of caution, I'm going to use them very sparingly. But I do want to point out the coffee filters themselves are also fair game. You can use these. I only have one because remember, this is just paper. No dyes, nothing like that. Now, buddy, will you go over there and hand me those eggshells?
Sure.
Thanks. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and point this out now at this point. I'm intentionally saving those greens for last. They go on top. You don't want them buried in soil because if the greens, like the lettuce, the onions, the cabbage, is under the soil, it will start the decomposition, the composting process, and it will increase heat. It will make the temperature go up in your bin, and it could hurt your worms. We don't want any of this stuff to compost in and of itself. We want the worms to eat it and poop it back out. Now, with your eggshells, you notice these are crushed up very, very fine. That's because worms need them to be crushed up very, very fine. They can't eat them if they're still in the big shells. If there are pieces in here that were not crushed up small enough, that's fine because they will in time biodegrade and add calcium to our soil, and we'll get those out when we sift for our castings here in 2 or 3 months. Now, buddy, if you'll go over and hand me some, hand me the peas. Okay, now just hold on to those for a second. Hold on to those. At this point, guys, you can leave it all on top or you can mix it into the soil a bit. I'm just going to leave it on top and let the worms do the work. So, hand me the peas, buddy. Here's some leftover canned peas that have been sitting in our fridge for just a little while. I don't like canned peas so much. We grow peas in the summer. We didn't get enough this year to can our own. Maybe that's something we'll get into this summer. So, but for now, like when I grow my peas in the garden, my sweet peas, they don't even make it into the house usually because I eat them in the garden when I'm out working in the garden. I just eat them right off the vine. Okay, buddy, if you'll hand me the other plate now. And then finally, we're going to finish up with here. I want to point out about fruit. Okay, we just have some cantaloupe and honeydew right here. It's perfectly okay to give your worms this type of fruit. Do not feed your worms tropical fruits like mangoes, oranges, limes, lemons. The acidic levels are too high, okay? But melons, it's okay. And we've got, and this is mostly just for example, there was an old carrot in there, an onion, corn on the cob, and then my greens. And again, your greens do not mix into your soil. Leave those on top. Now, my wonderful assistant Daniel, come here please. I've got to ask you a very important question. Okay. Now it's time for us to add the most important thing into our worm bin here to start our worm farm. What do you think that might be?
Worms.
Yes, you're as smart as your teachers say you are. So, we have our worms. And guys, we got our worms, and again, this is, I guess I'm plugging Uncle Jim's worm farm here. They got here quicker than the advertisement on Amazon said they would. They weren't supposed to be here for another 8 days. So we didn't have our bins ready yet, so our worms have been spending about a day and a half in this bucket in soil. I gave them some food. And by the way, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, we're using a lid. That's why we drilled air holes. We didn't have a lid on this for the last 2 days, day and a half, but the worms never came up out of the soil because we were using a light above them to keep them under the soil. Worms cannot see, but they are sensitive to light, moisture, and temperature. So if they start to come up to escape and they see the light, they'll head back down. So at this point, we are going to add our worms. Let's see how they're doing. Look at that. 1,000 red wigglers. Yep, there's none left in the bucket, so they're all in there. And let's just have a look-see here. Oh, look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Look at those babies. Hey, buddy, you want to come get a good look at the worms?
Tiny.
They're tiny. Now, guys, I want to point out to you, we've had these for a couple of days. They're already looking a little bit bigger than they were when we got them. When they ship, they will lose up to 70% of their moisture and their size and weight. So it takes a few days for them to get their size and their weight and even their strength back. So they are looking very healthy. Again, Uncle Jim's Worm Farm did us a big favor here. Now, you know what? I'm not going to spread this out too much because I've got these green vegetables in here, and I'm actually going to make sure that I'm pulling this green stuff up out of this without hurting the worms, because we don't want that to compost. And there's nothing wrong for me to leave this just like this, so I'm going to. Yeah, they're crawling around. And they're really enjoying themselves. Now, I want to point out one last thing here before we go, and this is my spray bottle with water. As you saw, we've got moisture in here by having soaked cardboard in here. The soil that we put in was damp because it's been raining, and as I went out and got the soil, it was already wet. There's no need for me to put any more moisture in here. There is, I'm sure, sufficient moisture in here. Now, let's say I wanted to add moisture at some point in the future, or let's say I put soil in here that wasn't so moist and it was kind of dry. I know I've got my drainage holes down there, but I don't want to create a tub full of mud. So instead of just dumping water in here from a bucket, get a squirt bottle. This one has a spray and just this squirt level right here. I can spray my soil down like this, and if the worms are right there, I don't want to be hurting my worms. So it's actually got like a misting, this particular bottle. You can get these probably at Walmart for $1. Order them on Amazon for $1. This is how you want to moisten your soil inside your bin. So this way you can put just enough and not risk putting too much. So we're going to cover it up, and we're going to keep our worms upstairs in a spare bedroom that we keep shut up in the winter because we don't want to heat it. That will keep them above freezing temperatures. Worms like 50-ish degrees, 50-ish to 70, low 70s. And 2 to 3 months from now, hopefully we're going to be bringing you a video showing you us taking our first worm castings. So do you feel like a worm farmer now?
See you next time.
Okay, so we'll see you next time. Go ahead and take your bow.
Yes, I do.
You feel it. So, happy trails, happy worm farming, and we'll see you for more next time from here at Homesteading Off the Grid.